So, face-to-face learning is learning at scale, hundreds of millions of students worldwide. So the question is, how do we bring some of the benefits of large-scale learning to face-to-face learning? Now, I work partly for a university, but also for Talis, who make higher education software for teaching and learning. And one of the products is reading list software. So you can structure your course resources into reading lists, embed into the VLE for the university, connect with course management and things like this. Currently, there's 86 institutions worldwide using this software, including more than half of UK institutions, and because they're the larger institutions, much more than half of UK students. Something like 500,000 reading lists, 20 million references in those reading lists. Each reading list will be catering for something like 10 to 100 students, depending on the size of the courses. So this is quite a lot of scale. Nothing like the hundreds of millions of students, but still there's a substantial amount of scale that we should be able to benefit from. In addition, we have software called Lighthouse, which is still under pilot, but which is a universal player, allowing you to look at PDF documents, PowerPoint documents, movies, and get analytics all the way down to individual page views. Normally with the VLE, you get your click-through statistics that say somebody has opened a document or downloaded a PDF, but beyond that, nothing. So suddenly we've got much more detailed information. Now this gives us scale in two different directions. On the one side, we've got individual students, but then many thousands of students in an institution, and in, of course, many institutions. We're dealing with 86 institutions, of course, thousands and thousands of institutions worldwide. But the other side, there's a scale going down to the fine scale. So each student is interacting with many resources, many courses during the course of their academic career, many resources for each one of those modules, and each resource has detailed analytic behaviour associated with individual pages visited. Maybe tens, maybe hundreds of thousands of points of information for each student, as well as many tens or hundreds of thousands of students in each institution and institutions worldwide. So we have a lot of scale here. However, it's a different sort of scale to the scale we get with MOOCs and other sorts of very large individual courses. With a MOOC, you have many students, tens, hundreds of thousands of students following the same course, following the same material, very often at the same time, and deliberately so in order to try to manage that experience in ways that are semi-automated. This gives you huge volumes, but of largely homogeneous data. You can then use all your standard big data techniques, apply that, create insights which you can then use to improve the learning experience. In this sort of diverse picture, though, we have a different set of challenges, and these are challenges of diversity. On the one hand, we have a heterogeneity of courses and institutions, lots of different institutions, but also style-wise, you have humanities courses that are perhaps based on reading original texts. You have computer science courses where people are programming. You have science courses where laboratories take the emphasis. So a lot of heterogeneity there. We see that, in fact, in the reading lists in Talis. You have some reading lists, typically, but not necessarily the more science-based ones, that maybe just have one or two textbooks as the full reading list for a module. But you might then have a humanities course or a history course with up to 1,000 and a few more than 1,000 in some cases, items in a reading list. So a lot of diversity in terms of courses. But also each student is different and behaves in different ways. And once we look at those fine degree ways of looking at the way somebody reads a document, we see even more diversity there. There's also a set of issues that arise because we're looking at cross-institutional data. There's issues to do with the ownership of data, particularly when we get down to this detailed analytics, because nowadays learning analytics is where you get start to get your value from. Also privacy for students. Who owns that data? Is it the student? Is it the institution? So lots of questions. I'll focus more on the left-hand side and more technical ones, but those provenance and governance issues actually start to become really critical. So both are important. Looking again at that heterogeneity issue in technical sense, the Open University have been doing some work on the course level of differences by looking at all their courses but clustering them in terms of the kinds of material. So rather than having perhaps hundreds or thousands of course to deal with, you start to deal with perhaps half a dozen different classes of types of course, which makes it easier to do analytics. So one of the questions we've got is, can the same thing happen as we look down to individual students? Some students might take a document and read from end to end. Some start and then give up midway. We see that a lot when you start to look at real data. You might top and tail a document. You might start at the beginning, then skip to the end and have a look at the conclusions, and particularly on something like an academic paper. Or you might skim the document and then look at a few bits in detail. The question we've got, and the work we're in the midst of doing, is actually asking, what are these patterns? If we can classify these, whether automatically or by hand initially and then automate that process, we're in the ability to actually then start to look at types of student behaviour, feed these into analytics, and then perhaps help pedagogic insights to say different kinds of reading behaviour, different kinds of fine analytics contribute to different kinds of outcomes.